Hey guys, tonight we're hiking up a misty trail into the mountains of medieval Korea, where winter isn't just cold, it's downright hostile. You smell wood smoke curling from thatched roofs. You hear the crunch of frost under straw shoes. And somewhere nearby, a giant clay jar hums softly under the dirt. Inside, a cabbage concoction that might just save your life. Because here's the thing, you probably won't survive this winter unless you've got kimchi. No, not the sleek little glass-jarred stuff from your local supermarket, but the kind packed with salt and sorcery, fermented in moon-chilled earth by hands that know survival better than any textbook. In a time without fridges, without preservatives, without even the concept of snack size, every mouthful has to be earned, and fermented, and buried, preferably in your backyard. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Let me know in the comments where you're listening from, and what time it is over there. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. The air smells like pine needles and fresh wood ash. You're trudging up a mountain trail in the middle of the Goryeo dynasty, sometime in the 11th century. Your breath clouds the air. The harvest is finished. The rice has been threshed, the millet stacked, and the cabbages, those squat leafy giants, are piled high in reed baskets by every doorstep. People are bustling with a kind of cold weather panic, a dance of movement you recognize even today. Get everything inside sealed, stored before the earth turns to stone. You pause at the edge of a village. The roofs are tiled if the family's wealthy, straw if not. One house has a clay chimney belching smoke, and someone's pounding something rhythmically out back. It sounds like war drums, but it's probably radish prep. You glance toward the garden, or what's left of it. Just a few stubborn scallions sticking out of frostbitten dirt. But below that dirt, something magical is happening. Or rather, about to happen. See, this isn't just a farming village. It's a survival lab. And while you might think the showstopper is the kimchi itself, the garlicky, spicy, fermented masterpiece, real success comes from something more boring and much colder. How it's stored. The first time you spot an ongi, you think it might be a bath for trolls. It's huge, maybe waist-high, made of breathable clay, covered in brushstroke glazes that shimmer faintly when wet. And it looks alive. Not in a cute way, more in the I hiss and gurgle at night kind of way. These jars don't just hold kimchi. They breathe. Literally. Tiny pores in the clay allow gas exchange, so as the kimchi ferments, it doesn't explode, which is helpful especially if you plan to live through January. Inside the house, a woman in layers of padded hanbok is kneeling by a low table. She's chopping Napa cabbage with the speed and precision of someone who's done this every fall since her second birthday. There's no chili pepper yet. That won't arrive until much later, but she's got garlic, ginger, salted shrimp, and radish. Her fingers are red and wrinkled from hours of salt brining, and she keeps pausing to sniff each batch. Not in a smells nice way, in a if this smells off we're dead by February kind of way. Outside, a boy is hauling straw mats. You follow him to the edge of the courtyard, where a shallow pit has been dug. That's where the jars will go. Not all the way underground, but deep enough to keep the contents from freezing. It's nature's refrigerator. A weirdly brilliant hack in a world that doesn't even have the word refrigerator yet. Historians still argue whether this form of underground storage developed independently in Korea, or if similar practices drifted in via Central Asian trade routes. One theory claims nomadic Mongol techniques influenced this bury and ferment method. Another says nope, this was homegrown genius. Either way, the practice became deeply Korean. You bury the jars, you wait, you pray nothing cracks. Just when you think things are calming down, an elderly man beckons you to the back corner of the courtyard. There's a tiny lean-to built from mismatched wood. Inside is something unexpected. A collection of broken ongi pieces, fragments of jars that split during previous winters. Some are glazed, some aren't. He shows you one, and it's weirdly decorated. Scratched with tiny drawings of animals, maybe protective symbols, maybe curses. Some people think the jars can listen, he mutters, or judge. You nod like that's totally normal and absolutely not terrifying. Later, as the sun dips low and the smoke turns blue, you notice the scent again. Not quite food, not quite compost. It's the first fermentation. The jars aren't even buried yet, but already the mix inside is beginning to wake up. It's the smell of transformation. You lean close, expecting the worst, but it's oddly sweet. Sharp, a little funky, but alive. Someone hands you a chunk of radish straight from the prep table. You bite in. It's salty, raw, but there's something behind it, like a promise. The real flavor won't come until the snow falls, until the ground freezes over, until you've forgotten what fresh cabbage even looks like. That's when kimchi becomes more than food. It becomes memory, heat, and rebellion against hunger. And tonight you've arrived just in time. The jars are ready. The earth is cold. The village holds its breath. Winter is coming, and the jars are waiting. You wake up to the sound of soft grunting and the occasional ow as someone lifts a basket that's clearly heavier than it should be. It's early morning now, and the mountain mist is thicker, curling around rooftops like sleepy ghosts. You step out into the courtyard and the first thing you see is a pile of vegetables. Massive cabbages, squat white radishes, scallions, and things you can't quite identify. Everything's coated in a fine layer of frost. Today, you're going back further before anything's fermented, before the jars are even warmed by touch. Today is about raw materials. Cabbage, yes, but also the earth, the water, and a touch of alchemy that somehow turns crunchy leaves into the soul of winter. You follow two farmers, siblings, by the look of their bickering, down a narrow path toward the field. They're pushing a wooden cart with a single squeaky wheel. Every bump sends a loud protest echoing through the otherwise still air. You pass rows of stubble where rice once stood tall, now just brittle reminders of autumn's glory. And then you see them, rows and rows of cabbages, half buried in straw. Their outer leaves are brown and weathered, but inside, they're still vibrant, packed with moisture and flavor. The sister pulls one from the ground, inspecting it like a jeweler with a suspicious gemstone. Too soft, she mutters, tossing it aside. Too small for the next. Finally, she finds one that passes muster. She lobs it into the cart like a melon. It lands with a muffled thump among its leafy kin. You try lifting one. Mistake. You immediately throw your back into a spasm. These things are heavy. Imagine hauling 50 of them up a hill every morning for a week. It's like medieval CrossFit, but the only reward is not starving later. Historians still argue whether Napa cabbage, now so iconic to Korean kimchi, was always the star of the show. Some evidence suggests early kimchi was more of a fermented stew of wild greens, herbs, and root vegetables, thrown together with whatever was available. The cultivation of large-leafed cabbages likely spread during the early Goryeo period, with some influences traced to Chinese agricultural texts. But nobody agrees on the timeline. Did cabbage rise to stardom organically? Or was it the unexpected result of trade, climate, and some farmer's lucky seed mutation? Either way, by your time here, it's essential. Back in the village, another family is stirring pots over a smoky hearth. They're boiling seawater to make brine. You duck inside and feel the heat hit your face like a wall. Someone hands you a wooden ladle. Taste, they say. You take a sip. It's warm, mineral-rich, intensely salty, like a hug from Poseidon. The salt isn't just for taste. It's for transformation. It draws moisture from the cabbage, prevents unwanted bacteria, and sets the stage for fermentation. This salt was hauled inland in sacks, probably on oxen. Not cheap, not easy, but entirely necessary. Now here's your quirky tidbit of the day. Before ongi became the go-to container, some households stored their fermented vegetables in hollowed-out gourds or even animal stomachs. Yeah, chew on that before your next side dish. These methods were less common by the 11th century, but in some isolated mountain regions, old habits held on like frost to a roof tile. In the courtyard, a young boy is making clay. Not potting it, just kneading. His hands are covered in sticky gray paste, and he's elbow-deep in a pit lined with straw. For patching cracks, he explains solemnly. Even the best ongi can chip or warp during winter. Clay repairs, layered and dried like cake frosting, are a lifesaver. You help haul the cabbages inside, where they're split down the middle and laid on woven mats. The cut sides face up like sleeping faces. A woman sprinkles coarse salt between each leaf, humming a tune that might be a lullaby or might be a recipe. Hard to tell. The room smells of garlic, seawater, and frost. It's intoxicating. You spot a ledger, just thin rice paper bound with twine. Inside are rows of names, weights, and notes like too bitter or brine too long. It's a fermentation diary. This family doesn't wing it. They document everything. How long to brine, how deep to bury, which batch lasted longest the previous year. You try to read more, but the youngest daughter gently wrestles the book from your hands. Secrets, she says with a wink. Here's a fun aside. Even in medieval Korea, some families were already regionalizing their recipes. Coastal families leaned heavier on seafood, fermented anchovies, brine shrimp, or oyster bits, while inland families preferred garlic, leeks, and mustard greens. And if you head up to the north, you'll find some households even used pine nuts or dried persimmons, which sounds weird until you try it. You're handed a bowl of something they call white kimchi. No chili, obviously, this is way before its time, but it's stunning. Radish, cabbage, pear slivers, all steeped in a light brine with ginger and pine needles. It's fresh, cooling, almost delicate. It doesn't punch you in the face like modern red kimchi. It gently pokes your shoulder and says, "Hi, I won't kill you today." As the sun sets again, everyone gathers around the low table. They eat fresh greens for the last time, savoring every bite. Because once the kimchi is packed and buried, that's it. No more fresh anything until spring. Just whatever you buried. Whatever you prepared with love and a tiny bit of fear. The cabbages rest, salted and stacked, dreaming of the jars they'll soon inhabit. The brine cools on the hearth, and the mountain wind rises again, rattling the windows like a warning. Winter is watching. Your fingers are still tingling from yesterday's salt brining extravaganza when the village wakes before dawn with a different kind of buzz. This time, it's not quiet survival prep. It's celebration. There's laughter, shouting, the rhythmic slap of hands against wet cabbage leaves, and even someone banging a small gong like they're summoning spirits, or maybe just alerting sleepy neighbors that it's go time. Today is Kimjang, the communal kimchi-making festival. And if you're not excited, well, you're the only one. This isn't a chore. It's a party that smells like garlic and ancient tradition. You shuffle into the courtyard, now transformed into a makeshift kitchen the size of a barn. Massive woven trays overflow with trimmed cabbage. Jars of garlic paste, pickled seafood, and shredded radish line the tables like offerings. Everyone has a job. And if you're breathing, congratulations, you have one too. A teenage girl ties a cloth around your waist and shoves a bowl into your hands. Radish mixing, she says. That's all the training you get. Your hands disappear into shredded white radish, glistening with brine. She adds handfuls of mustard greens, scallions, and something that smells suspiciously fishy. It's chopped salted shrimp, fermented for weeks already. Don't eat that raw, she says as you eye it with curiosity. Unless you want to regret your entire afternoon. Here's the first official historical fact of the day. The practice of kimjang was so vital that centuries later, in the Joseon dynasty, it became legally protected as a seasonal tax exemption period. Families could take time off from farming duties to focus entirely on prepping and preserving kimchi. That's how important it was. More important than taxes. More important than even some religious rites. It wasn't just cooking. It was cultural infrastructure. You look around. Every generation is here. Grandmothers squatting low, telling stories with cabbage juice running down their arms. Kids carrying baskets. Young couples whispering behind jars like high schoolers at prom. One old man sharpens knives while reciting a folk tale about a fox spirit who tried to steal kimchi and lost her tail. You're not sure if he's joking. He might not be. Everyone's hands are red from the salt. Everyone's sleeves are rolled to their elbows. No one's complaining. In fact, there's laughter bubbling everywhere, like the fermentation already starting in tomorrow's jars. Even the chickens seem to be getting in on the action, pecking around the edges for fallen scraps like they've waited all year for this. You spot something peculiar on a side table, a bundle of what looks like soaked tree bark, dried jujubes, and maybe a ginseng root. A woman sees you staring. Flavor layers, she says mysteriously. You nod like you totally understand. Later, you find out that some families toss in tree bark for its medicinal properties. Others use it just because their great-grandmother said to. Historians still argue whether these additions were medicinal or just regional flavor quirks. Someone murmurs beside you as they coat cabbage with thick paste. You smile. Apparently, historians have been following you this whole time. As the cabbage gets slathered with spice-free seasoning, the garlic, radish, briny seafood mixture, the energy shifts. Things get quieter, more focused. The older women begin the folding process. Each cabbage half gets slathered between every leaf, then folded tightly into a compact bundle like a sleeping baby. Or a burrito, a really cold, garlicky burrito. This folding isn't just practical, it's a kind of ritual. Each bundle is carefully packed into a temporary bin until the jars are ready. At lunch, the courtyard turns picnic zone. Everyone eats boiled barley rice with fresh, just-made kimchi. It's raw, vibrant, a little sharp. There's no fermentation yet, but the flavor is already promising. You get a bowl of hot soup, anchovy broth with turnip greens, and it's probably the best thing you've tasted all week. Someone hands you a rice ball with a sliver of raw radish kimchi inside. It's crunchy, salty, and clears your sinuses in one bite. And here's your quirky tidbit. In some isolated villages, kimjang wasn't just a family affair. It became matchmaking season. Young adults from different households would accidentally bump into each other around the pickling bins. Supposedly, some arranged marriages were sealed with cabbage juice still on their hands. Who needs dating apps when you've got fermented vegetables? By mid-afternoon, your back hurts, your arms are coated in brine, and your face has that tight, wind-chapped feeling that says, "You've been useful today." The folding continues. Some families have brought their own ongi from distant parts of the mountain, strapped to sleds or carried on wide trays balanced on shoulders. You recognize one family's jar by the straw fringe braided around its neck, a sort of good luck charm woven from last year's rice stalks. There's a break when someone trips and drops a jar lid. It shatters and the courtyard goes silent. Everyone watches as an elder picks up the largest shard and inspects it. No yelling, no drama, just a quiet moment, like something sacred has cracked. Then, she sighs, turns to the nearest teenager and says, "Get more clay. We patch." Late in the day, as shadows stretch long and cold across the mountainside, the first round of kimchi bundles is lowered into jars. Not buried yet. That's tomorrow's job, but packed tight. You help press them down with your forearm, and the mixture pushes back like a stubborn memory. A wooden cover goes on, then a flat rock. Some families seal with mud. Others use oiled paper and twine. You step back and look around. The courtyard is quieter now. Steamy breath in the air, red-stained hands on knees. Every face is flushed. Every back is bent. But everyone is smiling. Today, the village hasn't just made food. It's built a fortress against hunger. And you were a part of it. Morning breaks sharp and blue. The frost that decorates the rooftops is thicker today, almost ornamental. You stretch, bones creaking like an old gate, and hear the familiar scrape of wooden sleds being dragged over packed earth. Today's the day everything goes underground. You join the others in the main yard, where ongi jars, those wide-bellied clay vessels, sit in tidy rows like sleeping giants. Their bellies are already full of freshly packed kimchi, but now comes the trickier part, protecting them from 3 to 5 months of bone-snapping winter. It's burial time. You follow a group of workers, mostly men and a few particularly determined grandmothers, out to a cleared patch of land near the edge of the village. It's just dirt at first glance, but underfoot, it's different, softer. This ground has been dug up every year around this time, turned and turned again until it's almost like brown sugar. The village's kimchi pit is ready. Here's your mainstream historical fact. By the Goryeo period, it was already common practice to bury kimchi jars underground to regulate temperature. The earth served as a natural refrigerator, keeping the kimchi cool enough to ferment slowly but not so cold that it froze solid. Perfect middle ground. Some scholars argue this innovation came from earlier grain storage pits, reimagined for preserving vegetables. Others think it might have been influenced by northern nomadic tribes who stored meat in permafrost. Either way, the Koreans perfected the method. Now, quirky tidbit of the day. In some regions, people used to bury their jars upside down, lid on the bottom, base exposed. Why? Because the flatter lid sat better in the soil and kept vermin out. But it made opening the jar a nightmare. Only worth it if you hate convenience. One villager chuckles. You help lower a jar into its pit. Each vessel settled snugly into a circular bed of straw. Straw insulates and cushions like medieval bubble wrap. A teenager climbs in beside it, packing dirt around the sides with practiced care, singing off-key the entire time. The jars need to be deep enough that the top sits just below the frost line, but shallow enough that you can still access them later without needing a full excavation crew. One man, the designated Earth Whisperer, apparently goes from jar to jar, knocking each one with his knuckles. Thonk, thonk, thonk. He's listening for echoes. Too hollow? Air gaps. Too dull? Overpacked. You smirk, but no one else questions him. This is serious business. One cracked jar midwinter could mean days of lost food. Maybe even an entire family's supply. No pressure. As the sun climbs higher, the pit fills with jar after jar. You've learned the difference in shape: short, wide jars for cabbage, tall, narrow ones for radish or pickled shrimp. There's even one jar sealed with wax and marked with a red stripe. Special batch, someone says with a wink. For the new baby's first birthday next spring. Historians still argue whether these pits were purely practical or if they held deeper ritual meaning. Some suggest families chose pit locations based on geomantic principles, Korean pungsu, akin to Chinese feng shui. The idea was to align the storage site with natural energy flows, ensuring not just preservation but prosperity. Whether or not it actually helped the kimchi stay crisp, debate's still on. A cold wind picks up just as you're finishing. Dirt gets patted flat over the final jar. A light layer of stones goes on top. Protection against hungry animals, mischievous kids, and maybe spirits with a taste for pickled radish. Then comes the oddest moment of the day. An elder walks the length of the pit, sprinkling a mix of ground pepper, crushed charcoal, and what looks suspiciously like rice wine. To ward off rot, she explains without slowing down. Others nod solemnly. Is it science? Is it magic? Or just habit? Nobody really knows. But no one dares skip it. Lunch today is quieter. Everyone's tired in that deep, satisfied way that comes after physical labor. You sit beside a freshly covered jar and nibble on barley rice and a sliver of last year's kimchi. It's dark, nearly brown, and intensely sour, a flavor that wakes up every cell in your mouth. Sharp, salty, tangy, like edible electricity. Too sour? Someone asks, noticing your eyes twitch. No, you lie heroically. Perfect. As the group begins to disperse, families mark their jar locations. Some use sticks, others use small carved rocks. A few even tie colorful fabric to nearby shrubs, a splash of brightness against the dry winter landscape, like the world leaving itself bookmarks for spring. Before you head back into the village, you notice one jar off to the side. It's small, barely knee-high, and half-buried already. The lid is sealed with mud and pine resin. You ask about it. Secret stash, says the oldest grandmother, grinning like she's just won at cards. For when we can't take it anymore and need a little midwinter treat. You nod solemnly. That makes sense. Everyone needs a little emergency happiness buried somewhere in the yard. That night, the village feels calmer, lighter. The big job is done. The earth is full. And beneath your feet, hundreds of heads of cabbage are beginning their transformation. Slowly, invisibly, silently. You picture them in the dark. Layered, seasoned, pressed tight, and realize you'll never look at a side dish the same way again. You wake up to snow. Not a dusting, not a gentle sprinkle, but a full curtain of white falling from a sky the color of overcooked barley tea. The village roofs are already blanketed. The trees look like they've been frosted by a baker with a heavy hand. And the air has got that crisp, frozen knife edge that makes your teeth ache just by breathing. But here's the good news. You're warm. Inside your layered hemp clothes, under a quilted jacket, and near the indoor brazier, your toes have remembered what comfort feels like. The bad news? You're hungry, and it's barely midwinter. This is when the buried kimchi earns its reputation as culinary gold. You shuffle outside, boots crunching against ice, and head toward the family pit. The markers are half covered now, little flags poking out of snowdrifts. You find your jar by the red thread tied to a willow branch. You start to dig, and dig, and dig. Eventually, the earth yields just enough to reach the lid. You brush off the frost, wedge a stick beneath the seal, and pop, a satisfying crack of frozen mud. The smell rises immediately. Fermented garlic, sour sweet cabbage, salt, and spice. It hits your nose like a slap from the past. This is your first taste of properly aged kimchi. You pull out a bundle with your hands wrapped in cloth. The cabbage has changed. Softer now, translucent at the edges, stained orange from the seasoning. You tear off a piece and take a bite. And wow, it's alive. Not literally, don't worry, but the flavor dances. It's tangy, rich, slightly fizzy, spicy in a slow-building way. It floods your mouth and clears your sinuses in one go. You blink twice and exhale steam. Mainstream historical fact: by the mid-Joseon period, this kimchi wasn't just food, it was medicine. Doctors recommended it for digestion, winter fatigue, and even skin problems. Rich in lactic acid bacteria, it functioned as a sort of pre-modern probiotic long before people knew what that even meant. One 16th century physician reportedly claimed, "It brings warmth to the belly and sharpness to the mind." Same thing modern coffee promises, but this one comes with crunch. You return inside with your prize, and the house stirs to life. The kitchen fills with clangs, steam, and cheerful chaos. A grandmother pulls out an iron pot, tosses in anchovies, seaweed, garlic, and cubes of radish. Broth base, no shortcuts. Someone else slices tofu. And you're on kimchi duty. You chop your bundle, carefully, reverently, and toss it into the bubbling pot just before it boils. That's the magic moment when the kimchi and broth kiss. The aroma changes instantly, from sharp to mellow, from bite to blanket. Today's dish is kimchi jjigae, and it's more than a stew. It's a survival spell. As it simmers, someone shares a tale. A family that ran out of kimchi midwinter and had to barter their only goat for 2 jars. Not worth it, the storyteller says. The goat was named. Everyone groans. Here's your quirky tidbit. Some mountain households added persimmons to their winter kimchi batches, not for sweetness, but because the fruit's high tannin content was believed to help slow spoilage. The result? A slightly astringent tang that made their jjigae famously mouth-puckering. Travelers could identify a region by the way their kimchi stew made you squint. And just as the stew finishes, the door opens, and in walks your neighbor, clutching a snow-covered jug and looking smug. It's donkami time. Donkami is the other side of winter kimchi. Radish-based, milder, and brined in a clear, cold broth that somehow always tastes like fresh mountain air. The jug is opened, and everyone gathers bowls. Out come the milky white radish slices, pepper threads, and floating garlic cloves. The broth is chilled, tangy, and almost effervescent. You sip it like soup, but it feels more like kimchi's version of Gatorade. Historians still argue whether donkami developed before or after spicy red pepper kimchi became dominant. Some believe it's the original winter pickling style, uncolored and clean, a relic from pre-chili days. Others argue it emerged later, when chilies were widely available, as a palate refresher to balance the heavier flavors. The debate is ongoing, but the sipping is not. Your bowl is empty in under a minute. After lunch, Everyone stretches out near the brazier. You play a game with the children involving yut sticks, gambling away chestnuts like a reckless noble. Someone roasts sweet potatoes in the ashes. Another person casually drops an entire egg into the coals and says, "Check back in 20 minutes. There's a story for everything, even egg roasting." This winter pace is slower, but not lazy. There's still laundry to boil, firewood to chop, thatch to repair. But kimchi? That's sorted. That's sleeping underground. That's quietly maturing, transforming, getting better while you rest. You go outside again before sunset and see a fox dart along the tree-line. Pauses, watches you, then vanishes like breath in cold air. Someone behind you mutters, "Careful. Fox spirits love spicy things." You're not sure if they're joking. You make a mental note to bury one jar a little deeper tomorrow, just in case. Your breath curls in silver ribbons as you step out the next morning, and the world is still, but not silent. Snow drips in slow motion from the thatched eaves, and somewhere, a chicken is dramatically regretting its decision to touch snow. You've fallen into a rhythm now, a winter rhythm shaped around hot meals, with smoke, and the occasional scolding from an elder for forgetting to warm the bedding stones. But today has a different focus. You're not alone as you walk toward the storage pit again. 2 other families are there already, knees deep in snow and bundled like dumplings. Today's not about digging something up, it's about putting something extra in. Turns out, winter kimchi isn't just one and done. See, despite the giant November prep, families in colder regions often made secondary, smaller batches throughout the early winter months. These were usually quick fermenting versions, meant to tide people over until the deep-aged stuff hit its flavorful peak. It's like the difference between green bananas and the perfectly spot-speckled ones. Sometimes you just can't wait. Mainstream historical fact: these shorter ferments were especially common in wealthier households and Buddhist temples. Wealth gave access to fresh produce even in winter, thanks to greenhouse-like structures covered with oiled paper or strategically built against south-facing walls. Monks, meanwhile, were dietary magicians. Without meat or seafood, they had to tweak ingredients constantly, inventing dozens of kimchi variants to keep their meals spiritually sound and stomach-friendly. You're handed a jar smaller than the usual, but heavy with promise. Inside, thinly sliced young radish, green onions, a milder spice paste with extra ginger. This batch will be ready in 2 or 3 weeks. Barely a blink in kimchi time. And here comes today's quirky tidbit. In some highland villages, they added powdered pine needles to these batches. Not for flavor exactly, it added a faint resinous aroma, but for preservation. Pine was thought to have purifying powers. Some even believed it could ward off bad dreams. Eat pine kimchi before bed, and the ghosts leave you alone, a grandfather says, scratching his chin. You're not sure whether he's serious, but you nod solemnly anyway. Can't be too careful in winter. You help bury the new jar, carefully packing it under a lean-to to keep off direct snow. Then you stay to help another family unearth one of their older jars. This one's been buried since last season, and they're nervous. One crack in the jar could mean mold, or worse. Everyone leans in as the lid comes off. A tense silence. Then, a breath of relief. The kimchi is perfect. Deep red, the brine thickened with time, the scent strong but clean. Someone actually claps. You all laugh, high-fiving with mittened hands. And this leads to a deeper discussion. Kimchi doesn't just survive winter, it changes in it. Unlike modern refrigerators that halt microbial activity at low temperatures, The steady cool of the underground pit allows the lactic acid bacteria to keep working slowly, methodically. Winter kimchi becomes richer, more complex. It's not just pickled cabbage anymore. It's a fermented timeline. You taste some from that old jar, and the flavor nearly sits you down. It's bold and funky and fruity. That's unexpected. Someone mentions that aged kimchi often develops secondary flavor notes. Apple, pear, even hints of blue cheese. Kimchi sommelier levels, you whisper. No one laughs. They're already too busy chewing. Historians still argue whether these fermented profiles were intentional or accidental. Did ancient Koreans understand the microbial science behind the flavor arcs? Or were they simply following taste and tradition, refining it generation by generation? Some texts suggest a deliberate aging system: young kimchi for soups, mid-aged for side dishes, extra old for stews and pancakes. Others think it was just about not wasting food. Both explanations seem true. As the afternoon dims, you carry your share of the kimchi haul back to the house. Tonight, it's being used in something new. Kimchi John savory pancakes. You mix chopped aged kimchi into a batter of wheat and rice flour with scallions and just a touch of brine. The pan sizzles, oil popping like a heated argument. The scent is unreal. Tangy, toasty, utterly addictive. The first bite is crunchy at the edges, soft in the middle, sharp with fermented zing. You eat 3 before anyone can stop you. A child throws one at a sibling. It's chaos. Beautiful, crispy chaos. Someone mentions the lore of kimchi pancakes, that making them during a snowstorm would bring prosperity. You look outside, more flurries. We're gonna be filthy rich, you whisper. Later, the fire crackles low. You lie down with a full belly and listen to the wind scrape softly across the shutters. Somewhere beneath the yard, your kimchi is aging, fermenting, dreaming in the dark. You wonder if you'll taste the snow in it. Snow thickens. It's the kind that falls sideways, pushed by an unkind wind. Even the dogs look offended. You pull your scarf higher, regretting every decision that led you outdoors today. But the village doesn't stop just because the weather throws a tantrum, and neither do the cravings. Inside one home, the hearth roars. On the wall hangs a bundle of dried kelp, next to a string of red chilies like festive garlands. The air smells like roasted barley tea and charcoal smoke. And on the low table, nestled in a ceramic bowl with steam curling over it like a secret, sits Sam. Boiled pork belly, sliced thick, next to a modest mountain of kimchi. You sit. You roll a piece of pork in kimchi, add a sliver of raw garlic, a dab of fermented shrimp, wrap it all in a lettuce leaf, and then you stop talking for a full 45 seconds because your mouth is too busy being grateful. Mainstream historical fact: Sam and kimchi have been best friends since at least the late Joseon era. During Kimjang, the pork was traditionally boiled and shared among helpers, a reward for sore backs and spicy fingers. Some records even describe elite households ordering massive pork slaughters just before Kimjang, turning the whole event into a minor festival. Because nothing builds community like group labor and pork incentives. You drink barley tea, warm and toasty, and look around. People are swapping stories, offering second helpings, and comparing their kimchi strength like it's a flex. One woman boasts hers could wake the dead. Another claims her youngest used it to strip paint off a jar lid. Accidentally, she clarifies. No one believes her. And here's your quirky tidbit. In some coastal towns, they spiked winter kimchi with chopped oysters during Sam season. Not preserved oysters, fresh. Briny, slippery, and intensely oceanic. But they had to eat it fast. Like, same-day fast. The oysters spoiled quickly unless it was freezing cold. The result? Oyster kimchi with an expiration date so sharp, it should have come with a countdown clock. Some say it was worth the risk. Others still gag at the memory. You're mid-bite when the village elder begins one of his tales. He speaks in that storytelling lilt, a voice that sways like a slow fan. There was a jar. He begins, buried too deep, so deep the earth forgot it. Seasons passed, years. A child digging one spring to plant marigolds hit something hard. Thought it was treasure. Was it? A child asks, already wide-eyed. Even better, the elder says. It was 10-year kimchi. Everyone groans, but also leans in. It hissed when opened, he continues. Hissed like an angry snake. Smelled like the underworld. Did they eat it? Someone whispers. They dared. Here it comes. Historians still argue whether extremely aged kimchi is edible or ceremonial, he says, grinning. Some say it's a taste only ancestors appreciate. Others say it's divine. You wonder, 10 years underground, what secrets might a cabbage keep? After dinner, you help clean up and someone gifts you a small jar. Just enough for a week's worth of soup or two very generous stews. You carry it home like a sacred relic. Not because it's fancy, but because in this frozen world, it's a pocket of sunlight. On the way back, you notice the snow has slowed. The night is blue-black, quiet, stars smudged behind cloud gauze. And beneath your feet, under feet of snow and layers of soil, hundreds of jars rest like seeds waiting for spring. Each holds its own story, its own flavor, its own level of questionable spice. You sit near your brazier, wrap a blanket around your legs, and open the jar, just to smell it. The scent is sharp, yes, but layered. There's salt and chili, of course, but also something else. Plum? Pepper leaf? The ghost of ginger? You can't quite tell. That's part of the magic. You spoon out a taste and close your eyes. For a moment, you're not in a drafty room in the middle of nowhere. You're sitting at a feast. You're sharing stories. You're laughing until your belly hurts. That's the thing about kimchi. It doesn't just preserve food. It preserves memory. Time sealed in brine and spice, pulled from the ground like a message in a bottle. And tonight it says you're surviving just fine. The wind howls again by morning, but by now you barely flinch. Winter has settled into your bones like a slightly unwelcome roommate, always around, always muttering about firewood and cracked fingers. You roll out of your warm bedding, stretch your sore legs, and sniff the air. Someone's frying rice. Not just any rice, kimchi bukkeumbap. Kimchi fried rice. The breakfast of people who've given up trying to make breakfast look elegant. You stumble into the kitchen just as a pan sizzles. Someone is aggressively chopping yesterday's aged kimchi, and the pieces are so sour they practically scream. Into the pan it goes with leftover rice, some sesame oil, and a spoonful of pork fat saved from last night's balsam. It hisses like a snake guarding treasure. The final touch. A runny fried egg slapped on top like a sleepy crown. You eat in silence because kimchi fried rice doesn't need a conversation. It's warm. It's sharp. It's got that crispy bottom layer that feels like treasure. And you eat it all, scraping the bowl with your spoon like it owes you money. Mainstream historical fact: while kimchi itself has been around for centuries, dishes like kimchi fried rice really took off in later periods, especially as rice storage improved. In households with charcoal stoves, it became the go-to way to rescue leftovers, revitalize limp kimchi, and squeeze warmth out of humble ingredients. Some even considered it poor man's luxury, a dish that tasted indulgent without breaking the family grain stash. Today's quirky tidbit: some aristocratic households once made white kimchi fried rice. No chili, no funk, no color. Just pickled cabbage and turnip sautéed in beef tallow, with salt and pine nuts. It was elegant, refined, and utterly confusing to anyone used to spicy kimchi. One foreign envoy wrote that it tasted like a garden mixed with warm butter. He meant it as a compliment, probably. After breakfast, someone proposes a walk. You look outside at the ankle-deep snow and wonder what they're running from. But you bundle up anyway. Along the path, you spot a cart hauling jars toward the village square. A communal meal is being planned again. You recognize the rhythm now. Winter isn't idle. It's social. Even when you're just trading fermented cabbage for salted beans. In the square, the fire pits are already roaring. Someone sets up a griddle. And today's showstopper? Kimchi mandu dumplings stuffed with aged kimchi, tofu, and minced pork. You're put on folding duty. A grandma with fingers like origami cranes shows you the method. Pinch, fold, seal, don't overstuff. You immediately overstuff 3 in a row and get lightly scolded with a smile. The filling steams in your palm. It's warm and fragrant, spicy, yes, but earthy too, like winter's version of perfume. As the dumplings steam and crisp, people chatter about the coming thaw. It's not close, but not far either. The hardest stretch is almost over. You bite into a hot dumpling and burn your tongue, because patience is still not your strong suit. Historians still argue whether mandu truly originated in Korea or were adapted from Mongolian and Chinese culinary influence during the Goryeo dynasty. What's clear is that by the Joseon era, kimchi mandu had become a winter staple, especially during the Lunar New Year, a symbol of fullness. Literally, they look like little purses of prosperity, and people treated them like edible fortune cookies. An elder whispers that if your mandu splits while cooking, it means you're holding a secret too tightly. You glance at your dumpling. It's intact. You smile, mostly because you have no secrets, unless you count hiding that last jar of donkami from your cousin. By evening, you're full, warm, and faintly smelling of sesame oil. You walk home slowly, the snow now tamped down into paths lined with footprints. As you pass the jar pit, you pause, just to check. Still sealed, still cold, still waiting. Inside your home, you light the oil lamp and unroll bedding. You've got that happy exhaustion that only comes after a long day of good food and light labor. Someone sings softly in another room, and the sound blends with the creak of timber and the low crackle of the brazier. You lie back, hand on your stomach, and wonder if kimchi will still taste like this next season. And just before your eyes close, you remember something. In the far north, some people once fermented fish inside kimchi jars. Not fish with kimchi, no. Inside it, wrapped in leaves, buried in the brine, left to pickle within the pickles. You shudder, then smile. Winter makes everyone a little weird. By now, you know the drill. Wake up, check on the jars, cook something warm, complain about the cold, eat kimchi, repeat. Winter stretches long and gray, but the days blur pleasantly into one another, like soft brushstrokes on hangy paper. This morning, there's excitement in the air, or maybe just a slight break in the clouds. A group of villagers is planning a trip up the hill, where a handful of families store their kimchi a little differently. Naturally, you invite yourself. As you trudge upward, boots crunching over snow-glazed trails, you're told these families use mountain cellars. stone-lined caverns carved into rock faces or dug into hillsides, acting like nature's fridge. Unlike the lowland households that bury their jars, these mountaintop clans store them above ground, tucked into insulated chambers with tightly sealed doors. Inside, the temperature stays cold and constant, but the airflow is better. Some say it produces a cleaner fermentation. Others call it superstition. Welcome to our scholarly debate of the day. Historians still argue whether hilltop kimchi storage was a matter of climate practicality or class distinction. Was it about optimizing taste or just flexing elevation? The first cellar you reach has a wooden door nailed shut with rope. A young man proudly swings it open, revealing shelves stacked with earthenware pots, each neatly labeled with hand-brushed marks. You step inside. It's colder than outside, but not icy. The air is sharp with that familiar, fizzy scent of fermentation. You don't breathe too deeply. And here's your quirky tidbit. One family here stores their winter kimchi alongside salted persimmons. Not in the same jars, don't panic, but in the same room. They believe the fruit's sweet aroma gently influences the cabbage over time, creating a subtle fragrance. Like kimchi perfume, one woman says with a wink. You try not to laugh, but someone already beat you to it, snorting into their scarf. Back outside, you help clear snow off the access path to another cellar. This one's tucked under a craggy overhang, half hidden by pine needles and rock moss. The dragon's mouth, someone calls it. Sure enough, the opening looks suspiciously like a stone snout. You duck inside, careful not to hit your head, and find more jars, bigger, older. This household makes Beck kimchi white kimchi. No chili, no fiery punch, just Napa cabbage soaked in brine, then packed with pear, chestnut, jujube, pine nuts, and a light broth of ginger and garlic. It's delicate, aromatic, and surprisingly sweet. You're offered a small taste in a wooden spoon, and you blink. It's a floral, like cabbage tea with a crunchy spine. Not your usual explosion of spice. Mainstream historical fact: Beck kimchi was especially popular among the Yangban elite, who often preferred subtler flavors. It was served to children, the elderly, and during formal meals when red-stained teeth were frowned upon. Think of it as kimchi in formal wear, subtle, polite, and slightly smug about it. You help move a few fresh jars into the cellar, careful not to jostle them. Each is sealed with cloth, tied with straw rope, and capped with a flat stone. Some are labeled with names and dates. Others are simply marked with a carved symbol: half moon, lotus, crane. One has a tiny dragon etched into the lid. That's the spicy one, someone murmurs. You believe them. As the group shares a modest mountainside lunch, rice balls, roasted chestnuts, and, of course, more kimchi, you hear stories about the oldest jars. One supposedly dates back 5 winters. We forgot it, the owner admits sheepishly. Found it by accident last spring. It became the stuff of legend. The flavor slapped so hard, my brother saw colors. He may be exaggerating, or not. Later, as the sun begins its slow descent behind the hills, painting the snow in bruised purples and golds, you help cover the entrances again with pine branches. Not for concealment, just insulation. Pine traps warmth, and the needles add a faint aroma to the air. It's oddly comforting, like burying your groceries under a Christmas tree. On the walk down, someone asks if you've heard of ghost kimchi. You shake your head, intrigued. Apparently, it's a superstition that in certain villages, jars left unattended too long, especially near sacred trees or grave mounds, can become possessed by a wandering spirit. The kimchi inside becomes extra sour, extra fizzy, and if you eat it, you dream strange things. One guy swore he met a tiger wearing robes. A teen says, "Dead serious?" Another shrugs. Maybe he just ate too much fermented garlic. You chuckle, but also make a mental note not to snack near any haunted forests. By the time you return to the village, the light has nearly gone. People are lighting lanterns. Someone's singing again. You warm your hands by a brazier and feel the ache in your calves. It's a good kind of tired, the kind that earns you second helpings. Inside your room, you unwrap a small bundle of Beck kimchi you were gifted. You eat it slowly, one leaf at a time, savoring the crisp crunch, the soft sweetness, the way it whispers instead of shouts. Tastes like silence, like snowflakes on your tongue, like a secret you're not supposed to know. And you smile, because winter isn't over, but you're no longer just surviving it. You're living in it, with salt and spice and jars hidden like treasure in the hills. The next morning is strange. The village is silent, not sleepily quiet, but intentionally hushed, like a library of snow. You sit up and immediately sense it. Something's coming. A chill even colder than usual, crawling under the doorsill like a rumor. People mutter the phrase Jayanghan, the hardest cold. Not metaphorical hardship. No. This is the dreaded cold snap that can crack wooden walls and freeze rice mid-simmer. You step outside and the wind smacks your cheeks with the subtlety of a frying pan. Yep, this is it. And suddenly, the kimchi jars matter more than ever. Everyone checks theirs. You trudge to the jar pit with numb fingers, holding your breath. One jar has a lid askew. The snow around it has shifted strangely, like something pushed up from below. You kneel, press your palm to the stone cap. Still cold, but still sealed. Crisis narrowly averted. Mainstream historical fact. During the coldest stretches of Joseon-era winters, people would pile extra insulation on their earthenware jars. Often straw mats, layers of dried bean vines, or even padded cloth if they were wealthy enough. The goal wasn't just to stop freezing. It was to slow it down. A jar that froze too quickly might crack from pressure. The expanding brine could even shatter the contents from the inside. Winter was patient but glassy. Here's your quirky tidbit. Some desperate households, especially in the mountainous regions, wrapped their jars in animal hides to fight the deep freeze. Yes, actual leather coats for kimchi. If a cow had passed that year, its tanned hide might find a second life keeping the cabbage warm. It wasn't pretty, and yes, it looked vaguely horrifying at night, but it worked. Mostly, you help lay pine straw over the jar pit. Someone even wedges flat stones around the perimeter for reinforcement. It looks like a kimchi fortress. Should we give it a moat too? A boy jokes. Only if it freezes over, you reply. Later, you're invited to a family's warmest room. A cozy chamber heated from below by an ondol, the traditional underfloor heating system. The floor is pleasantly warm, almost suspiciously so. You shuffle into the room and instantly understand why this is the winter MVP. It's like sitting on a mild toaster. In the center sits kimchi jjigae, stewed kimchi with pork belly, tofu, and green onions. It bubbles gently in a black stone pot, sending bursts of tangy steam into the air. The room smells like a comforting punch in the nose. You eat slowly, spoon after steaming spoon. The flavor is rich, sour, salty, deeply savory. The kind of sour that feels earned. This isn't from fresh kimchi. No, this is stew kimchi. Kimchi that survived a full season, turned moody and intense, and finally graduated to the pot. Someone mentions, as you mop your bowl clean with a chunk of rice cake, that a jar once exploded during Jayanghan. The lid blew clean off in the night, launched halfway across the yard. It sounded like a cannonball. They say deadpan. You choke a little. Nobody was hurt, they add, except the kimchi. Rip. Historians still argue whether the practice of over-fermenting kimchi for jjigae originated intentionally or simply by necessity, when leftovers went too far to serve raw, but not far enough to toss. Some say it was a culinary accident turned genius. Others claim it was always part of the seasonal plan. Either way, the result is spectacular. As evening approaches, the sky turns that iron-gray color that promises another snowfall. Someone brews a batch of maselcha plum tea, while kimchi pancakes sizzle in a corner pan. You bite into one, crunchy, greasy, and just barely spicy. It's the kind of food that makes you question every diet you've ever considered. There's no flour in your version, just old kimchi, egg, and stubbornness. And in a moment of quiet, someone in the room asks, "What do you think your kimchi says about you?" The room chuckles, but you pause. It's not a silly question. Some say bold people make bold kimchi, extra spicy, packed tight, heavy on garlic. Others prefer light and crisp, with fragrant notes of pear or mustard leaf. And some bury it and walk away, trusting time to do its weird magic. You consider your own jar, buried out back, swaddled in straw and secrets. You haven't opened it since Kimjang Day. Not once. Maybe it's perfect. Maybe it's terrible. Maybe it's quietly fermenting into legend. But not yet. Not tonight. You sip your plum tea, now barely warm, and stretch out near the brazier. The room hums with soft conversation. Someone starts knitting. Someone else dozes off, spoon in hand. The wind presses against the wall like a needy cat. And beneath the frozen earth outside, the jars rest. Unchanging but changing, cold but alive, brined threads of memory steeping slowly in time. Just hang in there, you whisper to them. We're almost through the worst. Morning tiptoes in with less wind than usual, and you swear the cold feels gentler, as if winter's edge has dulled ever so slightly overnight. You shuffle outside, breath puffing in little clouds, and take a deep inhale. Then you smell it. Earth. Not snow, not smoke, just plain old, honest soil. A sign. Beneath the ice-crusted surface, something is beginning to shift. And in your gut, no pun intended, you know it's time. You walk out to the jar pit. Pause. Place a hand on the mound of pine straw and frozen soil. Then, like an archaeologist discovering a lost tomb, you begin to unearth your personal jar. Takes effort. The frost holds tight, stubborn like an old man refusing to get out of bed. But with each layer peeled back, pine, straw, dirt, you feel warmth creeping up your spine. Not from the air, but from anticipation. When you finally tug the jar free, it makes a soft pop as the lid loosens. Steam doesn't rise, but scent does. A sour, savory bouquet that practically sings, "I'm ready." Mainstream historical fact. The average household kimchi jar was opened only when necessary. It wasn't about impulse. It was about timing. Usually, a family would mark the youngest jar for first use, letting the deeper ones mature for months. Rotating the stock required memory, discipline, and occasionally guesswork. Some families even carved lines on the lid to track the passage of moons. You dip chopsticks into the cool brine, pull out a glistening leaf. The cabbage is softer than it was months ago, but still holds a bit of crunch. The flavor, wow, it hits every corner of your mouth. First sour, then spicy, then umami, with a lingering hum of garlic and ginger. You chew, eyes closed, and feel like you've bitten into time itself. Quirky tidbit: in a few isolated villages, there were once informal kimchi judges. Older women known for their incredible palates. They'd be invited, post-winter, to taste the household kimchi and give feedback. Think of it as Gordon Ramsay, but wrapped in 10 layers of cotton and wielding a bamboo spoon. One such woman famously declared, "This batch tastes like a jealous neighbor," which no one knew how to interpret, but everyone took personally. Your jar passes your own little internal test. You nod, wrap it up again, and carry it inside like it's made of gold. You even cradle it a little, Don't judge yourself. Today, the household decides to prepare kimchi bibimbap, cold noodles mixed with vinegar, gochujang, sugar, and, of course, shredded winter kimchi. A summer dish in winter? Blasphemy. But someone insists it helps wake up the belly. You're skeptical until you try it. The noodles slap you awake. Cold, chewy, tangy, with shreds of your very own kimchi riding shotgun. Suddenly, you feel more alert than you've been all month. This is the culinary equivalent of someone throwing a snowball at your soul. That afternoon, you walk to the neighbor's house, jar in hand. This is the other winter ritual, sharing. Kimchi wasn't just hoarded. It was traded, bragged about, gifted. Everyone made it differently, and everyone believed theirs was the best. It was less about diplomacy and more about showing off your grandmother's secrets. You swap yours for a jar of radish kimchi, the cubes bright and glossy. You note their jar's brine looks a little thicker than yours. Suspicious, but you'll try it. Historians still argue whether this sort of local bartering network around kimchi shaped early rural economies or simply strengthened community ties. Was it proto-commerce, or just neighborly bonding in cabbage form? You don't argue. You just accept the trade and eat a chunk right there at their doorstep. It's good. Very good. Different, less heat, more crunch, but excellent. You pretend not to be impressed. They pretend not to notice. You head home with new jars, a pleased stomach, and the slightly smug strut of a person whose fermentation gamble paid off. Inside, someone suggests a picnic. You stare at them. In the snow. But sure enough, soon you're helping pack kimchi rice balls, wrapped in dried seaweed and stuffed with anchovy paste. The group treks to a nearby ridge with a view of the frozen river below. The wind-up there is brutal, but the food tastes bold and extra sharp in the cold, like flavors made louder by silence. You share stories. Someone remembers how their grandfather buried a kimchi jar so deep he needed a ladder to fetch it. Another claims their family once stored jars in a cave with bats, who apparently never touched them. Even bats respect fermentation, they joke. Someone else, warming their hands over a stone brazier, shares the story of a forgotten soldier who carried a single jar of kimchi through a campaign, refusing to open it until he returned home. When he finally did, they opened it at the village altar and served it with rice cakes. He said it tasted like coming home. You glance at your own jar, sitting wrapped beside you, and suddenly feel the weight of months inside it. The labor, the weight, the slow magic of bacteria doing their weird little dance. It's not just a jar. It's winter bottled. And now you finally get to eat it. Evening falls with the faintest hush, as if winter itself has started holding its breath. You sit near the brazier again, watching the orange glow flicker across the floor, casting long shadows that sway gently with each pop of the firewood. You stretch your legs across the warm ondal stones, a half-empty bowl of kimchi porridge resting nearby. It's cozy, sure, but also oddly ceremonial, because something's about to change. This might be your last truly cold week. Someone mentions Ipshin, the first day of spring according to the traditional Korean calendar. It hasn't arrived yet, but it's on the horizon, like a guest whose footsteps you can already hear in the next room. And that means one thing: your kimchi's life cycle is beginning its final act. Mainstream historical fact: medieval Koreans marked the seasons with a system called the 24 solar terms, imported from China but fine-tuned for the peninsula's particular quirks. Ipshin wasn't just a calendar date. It triggered household rituals. Farmers prayed for fertile soil. Elders pasted calligraphy poems above the doors. And inside the kitchens, the oldest kimchi was finally pushed to center stage. That's your cue. You rise and move toward the storage jars with a ladle and a plan. No more rationing. No more nibbling. Tonight, you're going to cook with it. Really cook. The full sour, funky, fermented kind. The kind that's not so much a flavor as a personality. You're making balsam, boiled pork belly served with napa leaves, condiments, and, of course, aged kimchi. Your hosts have been saving a particularly ripe jar for this. It's practically bubbling with mischief. When the lid lifts, the smell hits the ceiling. It's not bad, per se. It's just honest. Like kimchi that's smoked a few cigarettes and read all the war scrolls. You carefully lay a leaf across your palm. Add a chunk of juicy pork, a smear of samjang paste, a sliver of raw garlic, a thin slice of apple for balance, and finally, a heap of that glorious bossy kimchi. Then, wrap it all up like a love letter and shove it in your mouth. Boom! Your eyes water. Not from spice, but from the sheer emotional punch. This is food that's been through something. This kimchi has survived months underground, countless frosts, one minor blizzard, and your personal doubt. And now it's showing you what it's learned. Quirky tidbit. In some provinces, people whispered that kimchi gained wisdom the longer it sat. The term seongjeonghan kimchi, meaning matured, was sometimes spoken with reverence, as if the jar had gone on a pilgrimage and come back enlightened. A few spiritual-minded cooks even left written prayers in the lid, believing it helped guide the fermentation process. You can't make this stuff up. Or maybe you can, but someone else already did centuries ago. You glance at the remaining jars. Fewer now, lighter, and you realize something unexpected. You feel a little sad. Historians still argue whether kimchi's role in medieval Korea was strictly practical or subtly spiritual. Was it just food? Or was it an anchor in the swirling storm of winter? A fermented thread tying each person to their family, their soil, their ancestors? You don't need a definitive answer. You just know the kitchen feels quieter when a jar is emptied. Later that night, someone offers you a taste of mulkimchi, water kimchi. You hesitate. It's clear and cold, floating with slices of radish, green onion, and chili. It looks more like soup than pickle, but you try it anyway, and it's refreshing, crisp, like drinking cucumber perfume that decided to live honestly. This was the kimchi for those who couldn't handle heat, or who wanted something lighter alongside a heavy dish. In coastal areas, it was paired with fresh fish. In inland villages, it was served at festivals, sometimes even sipped from small bowls like broth. And here's the kicker. Some families would freeze their mulkimchi deliberately during the harshest part of winter, then thaw it slowly to serve at special meals. Yes, you heard that right, frozen kimchi on purpose. Ice-cold brine, crunchy vegetables, and the kind of tang that feels like a slap from an icy mermaid. By now, your tongue is seasoned like a veteran soldier. No flavor surprises you. Not sour, not funky, not spicy. You've become one with the cabbage. And still, something tugs at you. You realize you're not just eating for nourishment. You're eating to remember what the wind felt like on Kimjang Day, what the old women whispered while rubbing chili paste into the leaves, what your hands smelled like after stacking that jar. Every bite is a story, and every story tastes different the second time around. You wrap another balsam parcel and savor it. Somewhere outside, a dog barks. The wind scratches softly at the wall. But in here, surrounded by warmth and garlic fumes, time feels slowed. Not frozen, just gently steeping. You won't have much kimchi left by the time spring actually arrives. And strangely, that makes it all feel more precious. The snow begins to retreat. Slowly, unevenly, like a cat deciding whether to forgive you. Patches of brown earth peek through the white, and muddy footprints start reappearing on the village paths. You can hear water again, not boiling in a pot or dripping from the eaves, but running, trickling, breathing. It's almost time to say goodbye to the long slumber of winter, and your precious jars are nearly empty. You head out to the storage pit. There are just 2 kimchi jars left now. You recognize their lids instantly. One has a deep scratch from where you dropped a ladle back in December. The other still carries the faint smell of pear, tucked deep inside from your experimental batch. You kneel beside them with quiet reverence. Mainstream historical fact. In the Joseon era, early spring marked the moment when kimchi stocks were lowest and most cherished. Households planned their meals carefully, rotating the dishes to stretch every last bite. Some even created specific dishes designed to highlight the bottom of the jar kimchi. Slightly mushy, powerfully sour, and absolutely loaded with umami. Think of it as a farewell tour. You lift a jar lid. The scent has mellowed with time, more perfume than punch now. You remember how assertive it was at the start, like a teenager in eyeliner, and now it's softened, graceful, a little bittersweet. You spoon some into a wooden bowl and just sit with it. This isn't just food anymore. It's memory pickled. Inside, the kitchen buzzes with spring cleaning energy. Someone's scrubbing soot from the hearth bricks. Someone else is drying out the rice bin with a candle, warding off weevils. And someone, probably the same someone who first convinced you to bury cabbage in the yard, is making kimchi buchimgi, savory pancakes laced with the last dregs of brine. You join them at the stove, and together, you ladle the pinkish batter onto the griddle. It hisses on contact, filling the room with a glorious smell of smoke, scallion, and fermented magic. Quirky tidbit. Medieval Korean households sometimes used kimchi juice, the leftover brine at the bottom of the jar, as a secret ingredient in other recipes. Some even mixed it into doughs, soups, or marinades to add depth and a haunted tang. In rare cases, it was even applied to minor wounds. Hey, fermentation is wild. One folk remedy called it ghost vinegar, supposedly able to drive out both cold and bad dreams. You're not saying it worked, but you're also not saying it didn't. Someone slides you a hot pancake. You bite into it, and it crackles like autumn leaves. The kimchi inside is deeply caramelized. Its once proud spice mellowed into something rich and complicated. It's delicious in the way only imperfect things can be. Later that afternoon, you help clean the now mostly empty storage pit. Gone are the jars. Gone are the woven mats, the straw, the makeshift weather charms. All that remains is damp soil and the lingering scent of winter secrets. You find a sliver of cabbage leaf pressed into the corner and leave it there, like a tiny fossil of the past few months. Historians still argue whether these end-of-winter food rituals held true religious significance or were simply practical acts elevated by repetition. Did scraping the last of the jar mark a spiritual transition, or just a well-timed craving for something fresh? You can't say for sure. But when someone in the household stands at the door and quietly says, "We've survived another winter," you feel a knot in your chest loosen. Dinner that night is light. The first sprouts have been gathered from under the melting snow. Nenji, shepherd's purse, delicate and nutty, tossed into soup. There's a small dish of finely chopped old kimchi, almost like a condiment now, sitting modestly beside the rice. No longer the star of the show, but still unmistakably present. And when you take a bite, it feels like the last page of a well-read book. You wander outside after the meal, boots squishing through the slush. The moon is thin but bright, and the stars seem to lean in a little closer. You look at the spot where your jars once stood. The ground is dark and soft. Steam rises faintly from the earth, like it's exhaling. Someone joins you, carrying a small cup of siki, sweet rice drink, slightly fermented, served cool. You sip it slowly, letting the gentle sweetness coat your tongue. It's almost the opposite of kimchi. Soft, smooth, forgiving, like spring whispering a lullaby to your taste buds after winter's shout. You exhale. The kimchi is nearly gone, but not forgotten, never forgotten, because somewhere out there, across the land, thousands of other jars are being emptied too. Other households are tasting their last precious spoonfuls. Other children are licking the sides of bowls, wondering if they'll remember this exact tang next year. And soon, sooner than you'd think, it will be time to start again. But not yet. Tonight you rest. You stretch your limbs toward warmth, your thoughts toward silence. And in the quiet hush of a winter nearly ended, you whisper a thank you to the jars, the leaves, the salt, the cold, and the strange, ancient dance that turned ordinary vegetables into a season-long story. You wake one morning to birdsong, not the tentative chirps you've half heard in the distance before, but a full-throated symphony of spring birds going absolutely feral in a pine tree. It's official. Winter has retreated. The air feels different now, warmer, yes, but also lighter, like the season itself took off a heavy coat. And in the warm breeze that slips through the doorframe, you realize it's time. Time to say goodbye to your final jar. You shuffle into the kitchen, still wrapped in your bedding, and there it is on the counter. Unlidded, half empty, and still proud. The last survivor of your kimchi cache. The jar. The MVP. The one you've been saving for something special, but now you can't remember what that was. Today, you're going to eat it all. Mainstream historical fact. In medieval Korean households, spring was the season for chigi, soups, and stews that could stretch dwindling supplies while using up the final fermented odds and ends. Old kimchi became kimchi jjigae, simmered with tofu, garlic, and whatever scraps of pork or anchovy were on hand. It wasn't just a meal, it was an act of transformation. Sharpness mellowed, flavors married. Time itself got cooked into the broth. You assemble your ingredients and light the stove. The kimchi hits the pot with a wet shhhhk, followed by a ladle of anchovy stock. It steams up the entire kitchen with a scent that could politely be described as aggressively nostalgic. You add tofu, a splash of rice wine, some spring onion for brightness. Then you wait. Steam curls from the pot. The broth simmers low and lazy, like it knows this is a moment to savor. You crouch by the fire, chin in your hands, watching bubbles rise. Someone walks by and hums approvingly. Jogium miyako shipio. I want just a little. You smile. That's the thing about end-of-season jjigae. Nobody wants to miss it. Quirky tidbit. Some villages had superstitions around the final kimchi jar. Opening it too early could anger the ancestors. Leaving it too long could spoil the luck for planting season. There were even stories about dream visits from departed grandmothers, urging you to finish your last jar with care. In one obscure folktale, a ghostly hand rises from a forgotten jar and pulls a greedy child straight into the crock. Moral: don't hoard fermented things past their time. You serve the jjigae in thick ceramic bowls, still steaming and slightly orange from chili oils. The flavor hits differently than it did in the depths of winter. is not sharper, not sadder, but maybe more reflective. Like that last line of a song you didn't know you loved until it ended. Historians still argue whether the closing of kimchi season symbolized renewal or loss. Some interpret it as a culinary death, others as a moment of cultural rebirth. After all, fermentation itself is a cycle, a beginning disguised as decay. One scholar poetically compared it to a fire that lights itself from the ashes. You prefer to think of it as turning a page. The jar is empty, yes, but your stomach is full. Your memory even fuller. Someone wipes the inside of the pot with a spoon and declares the meal a success. Another person asks when you'll start planning for the next kimjang. Everyone laughs, but it's not really a joke. That's how time works here, circular, not linear. The next winter lives quietly inside this spring. You help clean the dishes. The kitchen feels roomier now, as if the lack of kimchi jars has cleared a kind of emotional space. You run your fingers along the now bare shelves. In a few months, they'll be full again. But for now, you let them breathe. You wander outside into the sunlight, rubbing your belly and squinting at the green poking through the soil. The village feels different, buzzier, more vertical. People are airing out blankets, patching rooftops, taking down straw wind blockers. Children are chasing each other with sticks. Someone's roasting barley near the well, and the smell is both smoky and hopeful. And in the quietest corner of your heart, you start to miss the kimchi already. You remember the brining, the ringing, the mountain of leaves, the chili paste under your nails, the ache in your arms after sealing each jar, the frostbite on your toes and the laughter that cut through it. All of that, somehow wrapped up in the taste of fermented cabbage. So you do the only thing that makes sense. You start taking notes, not just on ingredients and amounts, but on feelings. What the brine looked like when it was just right. What the chili powder smelled like before you mixed it in. The look on someone's face when they tried your kimchi and asked for more. You make a mental map of everything that went right and everything you'll tweak next time. Because there will be a next time. And next time, you won't just be a helper. You'll be a guide. One more quirky footnote. In some temples, monks were known to keep detailed kimchi diaries. Not just for recipes, but for meditative tracking, how each batch reflected their state of mind. Was the cabbage cut too hastily? Did impatience make the paste too spicy? Did calm bring balance? The monks believed that the spirit you carried during kimjang shaped the energy of the jar. And honestly, you kind of believe it now too. The day ends with tea, chrysanthemum, pale and gold. You sit on the threshold, legs dangling, eyes tracing the curve of the hills. Somewhere out there, someone else is finishing their last jar. Somewhere else, someone's digging a new pit. The rhythm continues, and in your belly, there is warmth. In your chest, a quiet pride. You didn't just eat kimchi. You journeyed with it, from salt water to snow, from frostbite to firewood, from storage pit to soup bowl. And in that journey, you found something much bigger than food. Let's slow everything down now. You're still holding that last jar in your memory. Cool, heavy, earth-scented. Imagine it again. Not buried in frozen ground, not steaming on the stove, but resting quietly in your hands. The weight of a whole winter, nestled in clay. Now feel the air around you soften. Maybe a gentle breeze brushes your cheek. Maybe the world outside your window has stilled for the night. The fire's gone low. The house is quiet. Somewhere in the rafters, An old beam creaks softly as the warmth shifts. Let yourself settle. Let your shoulders drop. Let your breath become slower, fuller, quieter. You've wandered through snowfall and brine, trudged across icy yards with arms full of cabbages, waded through deep winter days where even the sunlight felt like it was fermenting. And you came out the other side full not just with food, but with rhythm, with story, with care. The kimchi is gone, yes, but it lives inside you now, like a song you once heard and can still hum in the dark. So wherever you are, tiny dorm room, big city flat, cabin in the woods, know that you've journeyed far tonight. You've touched ancient things. You've carried a jar across a season. And now, with the last of the tale whispering its way into silence, you can let go. The fire cools. The stars blink slower. And your dreams, when they come, will taste faintly of garlic and snow.